film, I continuously talked about the need to remain prepared if you're going to head into the outdoors. To that end, we looked at the sort of things you could leave in your vehicle to get you out of trouble, and we also looked at the pocket survival kit. In this segment, I wanted to talk you through my own personal extended survival kit. In the unlikely event that I had to leave my vehicle, the contents of this small backpack I feel confident would allow me to survive for at least 4 to 5 weeks. Well, here it is, my extended survival kit completely unpacked. So I guess the first thing to point out about this is that, if you take your time and really think about where things go and pack them in tightly, you can fit an awful lot of vital gear in a very small backpack. Perhaps the best way to talk about why I've taken the things that I have is to think back through our priorities of survival. Perhaps the most important item in here of all is this one. This is an EPIRB. In fact, in the film we were talking about PLBs, or personal location beacons. EPIRBs and PLBs are the same thing, it's just the EPIRBs are for a marine setting. Now, they're $500 with a GPS enabled or thereabouts, so I've been a little bit cheap here, and since I do a little bit of boating, I'm using my EPIRB to double up for my personal location beacon. If you don't do any marine work, buy a personal location beacon above anything else, because that $500 within Australia is a pretty much guarantee that people are going to be looking for you within a few hours. Next most important priority is signalling, okay? If you didn't have one of these, or if this thing wasn't working for whatever reason, we need to think about how else we can attract attention. I'm carrying a number of signalling devices here. I've got a large array of items which will help me create fire, to create smoke plumes to attract smoke. I've got, most importantly here, a map book. And this is a 1 to 50,000 map book of everywhere in Western Australia. And since that's most likely where I'm going to be heading in my car, I feel pretty confident I should be able to locate where I am. Of course, this will also tell me where local water sources will be, the path of least resistance, high lands, low points. High points, of course, useful to know because in signalling we want to get high and get our message seen from the maximum amount of places. So maps are really, really useful things. A simple little map book like that is invaluable. Another major signalling device I carry with me is one of these. It has multiple uses, of course. It's just another way of keeping the rain off us. This is a proper thermal reflective sheet. Okay, it's got two sides, one obviously highly reflective, which we can move back towards the item that we want to signal, like a passing plane. In the film you saw me use this in the tripod configuration. We can leave that on the top of the car. It's also got a separate side, so if you know the correct signals, you can actually sign with that. And that's a very useful item. Next most important priority for me is probably going to be to minimise my exposure. Okay? Exposure in a harsh desert environment like Australia can kill you within hours. So there's a number of things I've got here to help me. Most importantly, a full spare set of dry clothes, and they're double bagged. I've got a full set of top to bottom thermals, beanies, and 2 pairs of socks. Okay? Because you're not always going to be dressed during the day in the gear that's going to help you be warm. So always have a spare set of clothes, preferably a nice warm set of thermals. The other thing I've got here in clothing is the all-important hat. And here I've got an Arab style hat. They're a little bit dorky, but at the end of the day, these do a much better job than a peak cap. You can keep it on you, keeps you cool, keeps that sun off the top of your head, does a much better job. Sunscreen runs out, hats don't. Make sure you've got a good quality hat somewhere in your kit as well. In terms of exposure, I've got a number of other items. We've got the tarp on which all this is sitting, okay, so I could make this into a bedroll. I could create a sun shield during the heat of the day and rig it up off the side of the tree to get myself out of the sun. This, of course, could be my bedding. It could be something that I could lay on at night if I wanted to help that conductive heat loss. I've also got here a hammock. A number of people would say, why bother using a hammock? Generally speaking, I wouldn't need to use the hammock because you'd be on that sort of dry ground, which would be fine. But in certain situations, particularly around coastal areas where you get mangroves, you've got to get off the ground. And rigging an improvised shelter, natural shelter, to get yourself off the ground is very time consuming, and quite often you won't have the right materials around. A hammock is a lightweight, simple way of getting around that problem, so I always keep a hammock which is good for my body length and weight with me. I've got also here a rain jacket. You know, you could be with more than one person, so a spare little poncho like that for $2. They're small, lightweight, easy, just something to keep the water off people. Really, really invaluable. Another thing to help me shelter and minimise exposure here, I've got a 2-person thermal blanket. Like this one, it has a reflective side and the other side is a high visibility orange. 2 people could be in that and it's going to insulate all that body warmth, so it minimises heat loss, which is great. So I could sleep in that, and I've also got a 2-person bivvy bag here. I could double that up for me. A bivvy bag's just like a big sock for your body. Again, it's going to help heat loss, heat loss. It's small, it's convenient. They're hard things to improvise. Natural shelters seem really romantic and you see people on TV whip them up, but in reality you often won't have the skills, expertise or the resources around you to whip up a really good shelter. They're time consuming. Take something simple like that and you can improvise. Next most important priority for me would be water. Remember, without water for 3 days we're likely to die, okay, in temperatures of plus 35. So here I've got 5 long life packets of water. Each of these are 500 millilitres and they last for 5 years each before they need to be replaced, so they're great. With them I've also got some packets of oral rehydration. Okay, these are UN Red Cross registered use oral rehydration salts, a bit like electrolytes that you get in your Powerade products. If you're very dehydrated, often you won't even be able to absorb the water that you can find in nature. So if you are in a situation, sure, use the sort of techniques I've been talking about in the film to get your water. Be collecting all the time, but at least you've got some on hand if you need it. Okay? And with your oral rehydration salts, you'll be able to absorb them a lot better and it'll help your body. Most importantly, a lot of people overlook this, but the simplest way to purify and clarify water is to boil it. Okay? A rolling boil is all you need. You don't need to boil the water for minutes and minutes at end, but boiling water without some sort of pot is hard work. It might seem like it takes up a lot of space, but in reality I can pack a lot of things into this. Okay? It's very hard to boil water without one of these. So for me, it's a must in my survival kit. It's a nice big one, of course you could also cook in it. Other useful items I've taken along here are, well, just on the water before I forget, I've got 4 very big, large plastic bags. These are the ones that you saw me use for the water transpiration bag technique that I demonstrated in the film. Each of these are over 40 litres. I've got 5 of them here. They're easy to repair with a good bit of gaffer tape, and I've got some gaffer tape in here just in case that happens. But again, they're a hard thing to improvise, but they're a very, very effective way of getting water off our eucalypts. So a couple of big bags like that. Plastic bags will work, but of course they're nowhere near as effective. Fire and warmth when you're sheltering, all important. We talked about it in the film continuously, and I've got at least 6 or 7 ways of making fire here. I've got Barocca tubes to keep them nice and dry, lots of little pre-done Barocca tubes filled with tinders. I've got cotton, I've got Jiffy fire lighters, I've got hundreds and hundreds of matches in here. I've got 2 big flints, and on the back of both these flints I've got big pieces of magnesium, so even if my tinder and my fuel is wet, I can shave all that off. I can always start a fire with a flint and a big block of magnesium, so that's an extra one. A lot of candles. A lot of people sort of overlook the humble candle, but the candle is great because a candle will burn for a very, very long time and give you a good amount of light. So a couple of candles, simple and easy. More matches in here. I've even got, as a bit of a luxury, one of these butane jet burners. So if I completely couldn't get anything else going, everything was really wet and damp, these things burn at thousands of degrees, you could always get something going with them. I don't compromise when it comes to an ability to get fire going because it's so important for morale, it's so important for sterilising, clarifying water, cooking food, all those sorts of things. Make sure you take at least 3 or 4 ways of making fire, that way you're never going to be without it. The all-important compass. Okay, remember with your map, up on your map, the top of the page is always north. But north is not orientated to ground until you've got a compass. We talked about a number of ways in the films you can find your cardinal points if you don't have a compass. We looked at the solar navigation technique. We looked at using your watch to find it, but nothing easier than using a simple compass. Find north on your compass, align it with the front of your compass, put that towards north on your map or the top, move them together. Now you've got map to ground orientated north, east, south, west. You've got some idea of the direction that you're going to be travelling in. So a compass is incredibly important. I've got a well-stocked medical kit. It's got all the personal medications for me, plus I keep a good comprehensive array of other medications for someone other that I might be travelling with. Try not to fill up these with lots of bandages. Bandages are really easy things to improvise. You can use clothing, towels, all the sorts of stuff that people carry with them. What's hard to improvise are medications. So I've got a whole range of medications, asthmatics, people who are anaphylactic, etc. And I've got a full set of instructions about how to use them and a first aid booklet. Okay, no matter how qualified you are in first aid, you can't guarantee that you're the one going to be administering the first aid. So keep all that in there. I've got a number of ways of carrying my water here. I've got a few water bladders. I've got a few pipes. You saw me use this in the solar still technique during the film. You might have noticed that I've got a whole number of cutting devices here. I've got a wire saw. I've got a pocket chainsaw, which sounds a bit of a gimmick, but in fact they're very, very effective if used correctly. I've got a small axe or a hatchet. I've got a machete. I've got a way of sharpening all those. And I've also got a full tang survival knife. Now you might wonder why take 6 or 7 cutting devices. Remember that the knife is your life. The original survival kits were a couple of rocks. It was a flint. Okay, one to nap your flint, then you had a way of getting a spark, and the flint, when cut, made a good cutting device. You need a cutting device in order to survive. So make sure that you've got a number of different cutting devices. Each of them have their own positives and negatives. The bag itself can be used to carry all your gear around in, so a bag itself is useful. Rope is very, very hard to improvise when you're in the field, but has lots of multi-purpose item uses, making snares, making shelters. So I've got a big ball of twine and a whole bunch of rigging line there, so you should be covered if you've got all that. And all that, again, fits in a small backpack like that. It's a little bit expensive to set up, but you know, it could save your life, particularly a personal location beacon. $500 isn't a great deal to pay in terms of guaranteeing your life. The last couple of miscellaneous items that I've got here don't really fall into any particular category. I've got in a waterproof bag here, I've got a pocket GPS. A GPS is fine if you know where you are, because if you just get a GPS readout, it's not going to tell you where you are on the map. So it could be useful, but don't stake your life on a GPS. It doesn't at all do the same job as a mobile or an EPIRB or any of those other sorts of things. So make sure you know how to use your GPS. Insects can be a real big problem. Depending on the shelter that you set up, you could find yourself being eaten alive by ants, mosquitoes, particularly up north, or any other number of sort of items. The humble fly can ruin your day. And yes, you can take fly screens, but fly screens run out and they're oily. Simple flylet never ever runs out. Put it over your hat, wear it all day, you can wear it at night. It's going to stop you getting Ross River, malaria, all those other sorts of nasty things. Keeping one of them in my pack, an absolute necessity. Be a good idea to take too. One other animal that can cause you a bit of grief in Australia is a snake. Most of our snakes are lapid snakes. They're venomous snakes, and yet, even though they're so venomous, their bite is very, very easily treatable. The venom is easily isolated through a compression bandage. Okay? The best items for compression bandages are these purpose-made sort of heavyweight crepe bandages. Take half the stretch out and apply from the bite site right back up to that limb. Okay? If you're putting that at a reasonable pressure, you should be able to isolate any movement of the venom. A pair of gloves. Simple thing to overlook, but collecting firewood, things like that, splinters, quickly turn infected in tropical areas. Simple thing, very, very useful. I've got some flagging tape here. When you're moving through a forest, dense vegetation, etc., you want to do something called trailblazing. It's marking the trees, marking the bushes, so that you know which way you're going if you have to return on that path. And it's also good if you expect people to be following you. A search party, for example, they've got some way of following you. Now, there's numerous ways you can signal on the ground. You can set up rocks. You can do that sort of thing. You can take a knife or a hatchet and blaze the tree, hence the word trailblazing. But a bit of flagging tape, much, much easier to see. Keep it eye height. Put it on a tree. People will be able to follow you. In my little tin here, one item not many people would perhaps expect to find in a survival kit is a little bit of money. I've got some paper money here, and I've also got a number of 20-cent coins. A number of people have managed to walk their way out of the survival situation to a phone booth only to find that they haven't got any money to call anyone. So it's a simple thing, easily overlooked. Make sure you put them into your survival kit. I've got a good quality pair of small pocket binoculars here. If you do get to high ground, a good pair of binoculars could be a great little thing to have in your pocket to see where you're going, where help might be, where water might be, major roads, you know, signs of humans, water mills, windmills, that sort of thing. I've got a few hundred Puri tabs. Now this is just one provider's product on the market. You put one of these into a litre of water, wait for 30 minutes, and then that water is pretty much safe to drink. So other than boiling, I've got other alternatives to quickly purify my water. I've got one of these kinetic torches. These can be a little bit gimmicky, but remember, anything with a battery in it's likely to go dead just when you need it. So this one you can charge by shaking on it, and that way you've got a little bit more light. I keep a fishing kit on the side. I've got a hand reel here with a few hundred metres of line of different breaking streams. I've got a whole pile of little hooks and sinkers. If you do find yourself in a creek, particularly in a remote area, often the fish haven't seen many humans, they're quite easy to catch. So having something like that might be a simple and easy way of getting yourself a feed. Now this is not the perfect setup, it's not a complete setup, and in fact I'm always changing and rethinking the setup myself. Get on the net, have a look at other people's options. We'll put a list of all the items on the DVD as well. So have a look at it, and why not have a bit of fun and create your own long-term extended survival kit.